roles. Group and roles, they can simplify control of the database access. Groups, they are used to apply the permission to a list of users, while roles, they are used to associate the subject privileges and the permission within an application. So let us understand this. What is the difference between group and the role? Talking about the groups first. Group, it is an identifier that can be used to apply the permission to a list of users associated with the identifier. A group, it allows the multiple users to be referenced by a single name. When we have a whole group of data, whole group of people we can say. So this whole group of people, they can access the same resources, their requirement for the resources is going to be the same. Like if we have the marketing department, they would be required to access the same set of files, the same set of databases. So that is why instead of providing them single credentials, instead of providing them the single authorities, we make a whole group of them. And they can be identified using that group. That if they are part of that particular group, they can access these resources. For example, a company, it has an accounting group to identify the accounting department employees as a whole, and a payroll group to identify the payroll department employee as a whole. So to identify these groups, the DBA is who? Database administrator. The administrator who has the task of allocating all the resources. DBA, the database administrator. He creates the groups and adds all the users in the associated department to their respective groups. Now the groups, they can be easily maintained by adding and dropping the user as they join or leave the department. Like if we have various people who are into the accounting department, a whole set of group will be created for them by the DBA, by the database administrator. Since they would be requiring the same access to the files, so they would be allocated a particular group and will be allowed to access all the resources, the access permission instead of being given to the individual people, because there are a number of people working in the organization, there are different departments. So it becomes difficult for the administrator to allocate or to provide the access permission to the individual user. So for making that task easier, what do? They create a whole set of group that if a person he belongs to this marketing department, he will be allowed to access these resources. If the person he is a member of accounting department, he can access all the files which are related to the accounts. So that is how the things are done. We create a group and the people can access the resources as per their group. Now, these groups, they can be easily maintained. It becomes easier for the administrator to allocate the resources, to provide the access permission to the whole group of people all together. So now if a new user he enters, so he can be added as a part of that group. If a new person he joins the accounting department, so he will be added into the group and will be given all the rights. If a person he leaves that department, so that user he will be dropped out. So that is how the making the groups, it makes our task easier. It makes the task of administrator easier to manage the resources. Talking about the role. Role is an identifier that can be used to associate the permission with the application. A role is typically associated with one or more application to grant permission to those applications. Let us understand it with the help of an example. A company uses a restricted application that performs certain checks before updating the payroll tables to ensure that these tables, they are updated correctly. The database administrator, he defines a role, for example, the update payroll, and later assigns the appropriate permission for the necessary tables. The application developer, he associates the roles with the application. So role is what? Role is actually an identifier which is used to associate the permission with the application. Now we have many applications that we work on into the organization. So we have to put on variable, or we can say an identifier which can be used to associate the permission with the various application. So that is what happens with the role. So a role, it is associated with one or more application to grant the permission to those applications, that within this application are you allowed to access this particular application, granting that permission. So the role, it is an identifier which is used to associate the permission or granting the permission with the application themselves. Now talking about the single sign-on server administration. Single sign-on, it is an authentication method that enables user to securely authenticate with multiple application and website by just one set of credentials. Single sign-on. With singly sign-on, we by singly sign-on into using the credential, the people will be allowed to access the resources. Single sign-on, it is a technology which combines several different application login servers into one. Various login servers, they can be combined into one. With single sign-on, a user, he only has to enter their login credential, their username and their password one time on a single page to access all of their application. The single sign-on, it is an increasingly useful tool for companies around the world. It allows all their employees, all their partners and the customer to access the application and the services they need, all from one set of credentials. So we have in single sign-on server, what do we do? It is used when we have multiple users, when we have multiple applications which are to be authenticated. So single sign-on, it will help us by doing single sign-on on the application and the usage can be done. So that is why it is known as single sign-on on the server. In this, what is happening? It is also an authentication method which the users, they are using to authenticate the multiple application. But it combines several application and login screens into one. That is the main advantage of using this single sign-on server. Talking about managing the status and the monitoring. The rationale of the planned application development. It is that you monitor the plan to communicate the activity status and the interim checkpoints to the clients. Now, since we have seen now this business intelligence tool, this you have designed, this you have developed, now this you have deployed. After the deployment, you need to monitor it. You need to continuously look for the status of your tool. You need to keep the checkpoint onto the clients, that how the client to whom you have delivered this application, how are they making a proper usage of this particular tool. You have to manage the status. Why is this to be managed? Status monitoring, it has to be done so that suddenly some problem does not arise. You have to continuously monitor the status. So the overall goal meeting, the project installation date, it is the endpoint of the lengthy complex set of processes. Without the plan knowing whether or not the installation date it will be met, it is difficult. So status monitoring, it is the comparison of the planned and the actual work to identify the problem. We have planned this whole business intelligence tool in a proper format. We have seen that what all deliveries can be given using this tool, what all ease of work it will provide. But now to actually do this comparison of this planning and the actual work, because the planning and the actual work, they differ from each other. What we plan is not necessarily that we achieve. So for that, we need to do the status monitoring. We need to monitor the status of the application that we have built. That is it actually performing what it is intended for? So for that, we need to do this status monitoring. Then the project control. Project control, it is a decision and the action which are taken based on the project status. We have to do whatever project we have built, whatever business intelligence project we have built. Now we have to control it. We have to see the decisions and the actions that are being taken based on the project status. We have to check out the status of that project, that is it all performing in a way it is designed for or it is to be used for. So for that we need to do the proper controlling of this project. So managing the status and monitoring, it is another field in itself. That is again very important for the growth of the project and for the actual usage of the project. This monitoring and this checking the status, it is very much required. Talking about audit, business intelligence and data audit methodologies, they are beneficial for those who need to understand the ineffectiveness of their business intelligence and the data platform. See, auditing is very important. Auditing, what is the benefit of auditing? Once the project it is being installed, it is being used. Now the proper auditing of it is required. It is required for the people, the team, or for the high-end user to keep an audit, to keep a check. Audits are required to keep a check to understand whether the things are going on as per the requirement. During the audit, the customer, they will receive the experience and the knowledge of the business intelligence partner consultants on multiple client platforms and the environment. With this data management and the business intelligence audit, the customer, they can be assured that they are getting the most out of their deployment, following the best practices, ensuring the efficiency of all the system and potentially avoiding the downtime. So the proper auditing, it is very much required. Once the project is installed, the project is in use, auditing will help us to help it perform in a better way. If you might have heard of this term audit, that in an organization audits are done. Audits are done if we are talking about a particular organization which deals with the food products. So anytime audits can be done by the people, by the high-end people, by the managers. What will they understand in the auditing? That are the processing, are all the food products that are being manufactured there, they are using all the fresh resources, they are fulfilling all the criteria which are required for those food products to be developed. So auditing is very much required. Auditing, it will help the people to understand, to use the various resources in the correct way. So very similarly, business intelligence audits are also required. These audits, they may be done by the high level managers of the organization, or may be done by some external people also, or you as the project developer who has developed it, they can themselves go and check whether the tools they have developed, they are performing their function in a well-defined way. So for that, auditing is required. They are beneficial for those who need to understand the ineffectiveness of their business intelligence and the data platform. That if there is something ineffective, if there is something which is not actually producing the correct result, so that ineffectiveness can be sought out with the help of the various audits that are being done. Now, mail server and the portal integration. A mail server, it is a computer system that sends and receives the email. In many cases, the web server and the mail server, they are combined in a single machine. However, larger internet service provider and the public email services like the Gmail or the Hotmail, they may use dedicated hardware for sending and receiving the email. So that a kind of mail server that we have to use into our businesses also. The purpose of this particular mail server, if it is installed, this mail server will help us to send the data, to send the various things related to our products to the customers. So we have to install a proper mail server into our business, into our organization, which will help us to send and receive the emails to the various people within the organization and to the external people also whom we are working with. Portal integration. Portal integration, it enables the delivery of highly customized content through pluggable user interface component that use the web services to produce the fragments of markup code that are aggregated into a portal page. So with the help of portal integration, what do? We keep a single access point. Whatever mails, whatever things are coming, we keep a single access point for them. How will this help us? This will help us in easy retrieval of the data, easy retrieval of various mails. For that purpose, what do? We do the portal integration. That means it will enable the delivery of highly customized content through the pluggable user interface component that is using the various web services. So in using this portal integration, we are actually integrating this whole set of mailing and accessing all the web resources at a single point. So with the help of mail server and with the help of portal integration, the tool, the business intelligence project that we have developed, relatables of that project, they can be easily shared with various people. So this mail server, this is actually going to help sharing or communicating all the information. Now, last topic of this unit, it is backup and the restore. Now, since in the organization we have so much of data, now storing this data is one task. But another important thing along with the storing of this data is to keep a backup of that data. We can store the data at one place. But what if that particular drive where all the data is being stored, it crashes? So we need to keep a backup of our data. And from that backup, we can restore the data whenever required. So the backup and the recovery, they describe the process of creating and storing the copies of data that can be used to protect the organizations against the data loss. This is also known as the operational recovery. What do? We create and we store the copy of our data, which can be further used to protect the organizations against any data loss. Because the organization, a whole set of this business intelligence project that we have developed, it is totally dependent on the data. So it is very, very much important to store this data and keep a backup of it. Because if the company somehow loses some important data, so that loss, it will going to harm the company a lot. So for that purpose, we need to keep a backup for our data. Now, recovery from a backup, it typically involves restoring the data to the original location or to any alternate location where it can be used in place of the lost or the damaged data. So, keeping a separate copy of the data, that is called backup of the data. Now, restoring means taking that backup of data and putting it at the actual location or to some other location. That is called recovery of the data. So a proper backup copy, it is stored in a separate system or medium like a tape from the primary data to protect against the possibility of data loss due to the primary hardware or the software failure. That means today we have various options. Earlier it was that we need to store the data into the CDs or into the hard drives or to something as a backup. But now today we have number of options. We have cloud computing, we have remote server where we can all store our data. Like today, even in your mobile phone, you store your photographs, you can put them on the Google Drive. So later on, when suppose you have deleted some of the photographs also, then also you can retrieve them from the Google Drive. So you can store your data on the clouds also today, on the remote server also. So that if there is some problem with the data accessibility within the organization, within the databases of the organization where you have stored your data, you can access that data from the remote server. So that data, once accessible, it can be used for the further analysis. And backing up means storing the data at one other place, and restoring means now taking the data from that location and putting it back at place. So this backup and restorage, this is again very, very important for the business intelligence tool, because our business intelligence tool, it is entirely relying on the data. So now securing this data, it is very important.